Jumper's all messed up. It's rubbish. Hello everybody and welcome to Mark Goldbridge. Going for Goldbridge. I know, boo, hiss, boo, boo, boo. You said you were doing cooking with Goldbridge. I was doing cooking with Goldbridge. The kids are going to have a McDonald's tonight. I was going to make it and the stuff got delivered and the avocados are off. That's what happens when you get your food delivered sometimes. They'll send you the rubbish. I'm not happy. There's a sternly worded email being written by the wife as I speak. But we're going to have to do a bonus going for Goldbridge. But I've got a cracking topic for you. And Cooking with Goldbridge will be back. But Goldbridge life in crime. Who would have thought that? Who would have thought that, having worked in the police? Well, I did. I flirted with crime, and I'm going to tell you the story with it. Because I think we've all got a story about, you know, if I'd gone this way, I could have ended up this way. And we're not talking Elton John or anything like this. We're talking crime. And that's not a crime. So we're going to talk crime. And I think that, look, I can't profess to say that, as I said last week, I didn't grow up in an area where, you know, getting into gangs for selling drugs or carrying knives was a problem. The only knives we carried was pocket knives to cut bits of wood for arrows when we were playing Robin Hood. But no, but I did flirt with crime, and this is something we're going to be talking about as well. Also, some podcast observations. Lockdown. What is happening with lockdown? Could we be going back into it? But let's start off on crime, because I think this is an interesting thing, because everybody seems to have flirted with crime, like I say. I remember working with a guy and we all remember things. I'm bored of saying I very vividly remembered. You remembered it. I remembered it. Okay. So we were at. I've met so many people in life, and I always take it on face value, because I think, why lie? Who will go, you know, my upbringing, my background, I could have very easily gone into crime, but now I work on the checkout at Tesco. I'm mocking them in a way, but I don't mean to do that. But no, there are loads of examples, lots of celebrities out there. I could have turned to crime. Now look at me, I've won an Oscar. I could have turned to crime. Now I'm the Prime Minister. I don't know whether Boris Johnson has a story about, you know, maybe turning to crime, but I'm sure many people would say he has. But I do remember being on an away day once at work. Away days are just an excuse to bore people to death by doing pointless bloody activities to get everybody out of the office. And I remember this guy Calvin standing up and saying how he turned away from crime as a young age. He could have gone into a gang and got into all sorts of trouble, and now a lot of the people he grew up with were either dead or in prison. And it was quite a hard-hitting thing, and a lot of people like respected him for it, because they were like, you know what, look at him now he works in insurance. But the odd thing about this is, and where everybody's got a story, but some people like to bend the rules with their story, is that about 18 months after that, most of us got invited to Calvin's wedding reception. And when we were at his wedding reception, we were like, oh, this is quite a nice thing. He has done well for himself. But a couple of us were sat on the table with Calvin's aunt and uncle, and it was very obvious that Calvin's aunt and uncle were not from a deprived working class background. And it transpired when we got to meet Calvin's mum and dad, they weren't either. And effectively, Calvin had told a lie, because Calvin had grown up in a middle-class area of Outer Nottingham. So, you know, people will tell lies. But I have delved in crime. And I've had my thoughts about it. And I think that, you know, could we have all trodden a path less? Well, some of you might be in crime already, in which case you're saying I'm already a criminal. I'm doing well, or I'm watching from prison. But we've all had that what if moment. I mean, I actually do remember when I lived in Dublin, I was getting the dart back. It was obviously an after work do, because we must have started drinking about like 5 o'clock, because for me to get the dart back, it's the equivalent of the underground, but it's overground in Dublin, and it's called the dart. It's basically a train thing. And I was getting it back to Malahide at probably about 10:30 or something like that. And I was sat there on the train. We were going through, you know, you have to pass through some less posh areas of where I lived, and I was looking out the window with a few pints in me, and I was thinking, I was looking out at Dublin, because you could see Dublin all lit up, and I thought, ooh, Dublin's a fair city, but is it fair? There's a lot of crime there, there's a lot of drugs there, you know, it's a hard-hitting city. There's some really good books written by people about Dublin, and I thought, you know what, with a few drinks in me, I was like, I could be a crime boss. I could run a crime syndicate and be Don Goldbridge, even though that wasn't my name then, but I could have made my name up for that. And yeah, I could run it. And then I started to think it through, and I thought, you know what? I don't really need that hassle in my life. You know, managing a crime organisation. Oh, look, such and such, the prostitute, she's getting a bit rough around the edges. We might need a new one. Performance management. You've not kneecapped enough people this week. Oh, we're not selling enough drugs in this section. I just thought, I don't need the headache of that. Management of a crime syndicate's not for me. It's not all good fellas. I bet a lot of it's, Excel spreadsheets and bottom lines. And that's not a metaphor for anything. I mean, like, making profit bottom lines. We're not going to be a gang that gets a Stanley knife and marks bottoms as our calling point. But yeah, I do always remember that. And look, you know what? Everybody loves Goodfellas. Everyone loves The Godfather. But yeah, it's not all Goodfellas and Godfellas. Godfellas or Goodfellas. These people are doing it 24/7. They've got supply lines. They've got logistics. They've got people to manage. Payroll. Probably not national insurance and tax. That's not going to work. But you've still got to manage people. Anyway, I digress. So I've actually flirted with crime, but I've actually been a criminal. This is where I'm going with this. I've been a criminal, and this goes back to primary school. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. The Rubbernecking Gang. But people laugh about this. But this is my big flirtation with crime. It was a gang, and it was the Rubbernecking Gang, and it did exactly what it said on the tin. It became quite a big organisation until it got rumbled. And the story is this: we were about 8. There was about 8 of us in it, and basically this was probably, I don't know when this was, early 90s, late 80s. It must have been the late 80s actually. And rubbers were quite a popular thing then. And I'm not using a different word. I mean rubbers, where you write in pencil and you rub it out. There used to be rubbers that were big white things that just smelt nice. There was novelty rubbers that you put on the end of your pencil. There were rubbers that were cars. There were rubbers that were, I even remember the creme de la creme was like an LP, which is a round record, as a rubber. There was lots of them, and this was after Christmas. Everyone had got a rubber for Christmas, and some of us hadn't. And it started off with a mate of ours on our table coming over, and you say, "Have you seen Jimmy with his rubber showing it off?" "Oh yeah, I've seen it." Bloody show off. Well, he ain't showing off anymore. Look at this. And we all came round, takes it out of his pocket, he had the rubber. And that's where it started. And it became a challenge. Who could get the most rubbers? And we'd all have like little tactics. Mine was, I'd go over to a girl. In fact, I wish I'd used this in later life. My rubbernecking tactics with girls were far better than my pickup lines. But I'd go over there to a girl, let's say her name's Nicola, and I'd go, "Hello, Nicola. Have a nice weekend." I've already eyed the rubber next to her hand. "Have a nice weekend?" "Yeah, not too bad. I spent it watching Baywatch and out playing in the garden." We were 8, and I was 8. But as I walked over, I'd sort of lean on the desk and purposely put my hand on top of the rubber. Now, the main thing is, register whether she's seen what you've done. If she hasn't, carry on the conversation. You can't be too obvious. You want this to be memorable because you've got a reputation, but you also want it to be not memorable when she thinks about her rubber. So you'd carry the conversation on, taking your hand away, but also taking the rubber with you into the grip and like that. "Oh yeah. Well, what did I do?" "Well, I watched a bit of football on teletext because Sky didn't exist. Had a nice Finder's crispy pancake and chips for tea, and then just stayed out of trouble and went to bed. Anyway, speak to you next week, Nicola." Off you go. Back to the hoard, which in those days, and I don't know whether it's like it at primary school now, everyone had a tray. You take your tray out at the start of the day, had your books in, your pencils and that, and at the end of the day you put your tray in. Well, we fashioned a tray that was an empty tray for somebody who'd left the school, put a few books on top of the rubbers, and we ended up getting quite a stash. But we got rumbled. We didn't get caught, but on school assembly one day, lots of complaints had gone in about rubbers going missing, and a few parents had sent letters in. Well, the headmistress was onto it. "Who is nicking all the rubbers?" And we were like, "It's only a matter of time. The rubbers are in that tray. They could fingerprint it. They never would have done. But you panic when you're 8. So we hatched a plan. We need to take the heat off the Rubbernecking Gang. We need to get our hoard into the bank, let it earn a bit of interest, and just enjoy life for a little bit. We're 8. We can be out in the playground kicking the leaves. And there the plan was hatched. We took the rubbers out one lunchtime in a bag which was a rucksack of Jimmy's. Not Jimmy's, he'd had a Rubbernicked, probably Johnny's. Rubber Johnny. Anyway, that wasn't done on purpose. If I'd done that on purpose, I'd quit going for Goldbridge. You don't get that level of comedy on here. Poor. Anyway, we took the rubbers in the bag down to the corner of the playground where there was a tree and some leaves that nobody ever went. We kicked up the leaves, we tipped the rubbers out into a plastic bag, put them under the leaves, hid them. We'll be back in a few months, we thought. Well, we did think, because 2 weeks later, two absolute prats who no one ever played with because they just hung around on themselves, two girls, had been playing around in the leaves, kicked it up and they found the rubbers. Well, I tell you what, I used to go red in those days if I was a little bit embarrassed. I went very red that day. And I think everybody knew I was involved, but I was never going to admit it. Watch last week's episode. Don't do it. So, unless it's something really criminal, which Rubbernecking Gang, no. I'm no snitch. I'm no grass. Anyway, head teacher a couple of weeks later, thanks to Lydia and Karen, probably wasn't their names. I'm not a grass, like you say. Look at what we found. A big bag of rubbers. Who's nicked these? Well, I was redder than a traffic light, but there's no way I'm owning up to this. And people were actually looking, going, he looks very hot. In fact, I think somebody said, he looks hot, miss. And I went, you're getting beat up at lunchtime. But in my head, and I probably never did it because I was probably too worried, and I'm not that sort of boy, even at 8. We got rumbled, and that was it for me. We had a meeting of the Rubber Gang at lunchtime. Where do we go from here? And I said, I'm out. I'm no Donny Brasco. I'm not turning coin, but I'm out. I don't need this heat anymore. I've got a few rubbers at home that I took out of that no one ever knew. I had my own private stash. I was ready to retire. I'd taken off the top. Maybe they did it themselves, but that was the end of the Rubbernecking Gang. So that was my I mean, look, that came to mind when I was thinking about this the other day about crime, and I'm sure I've done other things. I mean, we've all had a little bit of you know what do you mean? What do you mean, Mark? You know what? Maybe smoking something that's not quite totally legal. But yeah, I can't say that I've ever. I can't ever say that apart from the Rubbernecking Gang that I've ever had any real concern or peer pressure to get involved in crime. But some people do. Some people do. And yeah, there you go. What did I want to talk about next? I mean, lockdown's quite interesting. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about next. I had this dream, actually last night, so this feeds in quite nicely. Last night I had this dream that I don't know what, I was half awake, half asleep, and I'm grabbing on my hamstring and I'm going, and I'm playing for Spurs. I think I'm Harry Kane, but he's actually playing up front with me because he comes over and he goes, you're right, let's fucking do him. Let's fucking get the 3 points. And I said, I can't, my hamstring's hurt. And I was like rolling around like this. But then I was rolling in my bed going like this. And the wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, the hamstring, it's just gone. And she says, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, yeah. My hamstring really does hurt though. Go to sleep. But my hamstring does really hurt. And the glamorous thing about this is I've got no idea why I've pulled my hamstring, but I have pulled my hamstring. It's been hurting me for a couple of days and it's getting worse. Now, I never pulled my hamstring when I used to play competitive football in my late teens and 20s. But now, as I'm approaching, well, let's just say around 40, could be above, could be below, whatever, I've pulled my hamstring, quite probably just walking to the shop. That's the only thing I can think that I might have overstretched when I was walking to the shop. It's depressing. You've got all this to come. You get injuries that you never would have got from prime sport in your 20s. You get to my age, you start picking up these injuries. You know, you lift a heavy, you go to get the beans out the cupboard. You can't be bothered to just pull apart and take one out from a 4-pack, so you take all 4. Oh, you've done your wrist. So, and you don't want to do that. My wrists are very strong. They're well exercised. But, yeah, I just wanted to mention that, my hamstring story. That's just fresh. That's fresh out of the box. That wasn't something I was going to talk about. But talking about walking to the shop, the reason I mentioned the hamstring, because it does... I don't know whether anybody else listens to podcasts, but I don't. I'm quite late to a lot of good parties. Some people say fashionably late. Some people say you've turned up too late. And I think with podcasts and listening to things when I'm walking along, I'm very late to this party. But I downloaded a few books and things, and I was listening to But I'm not going to tell what it is because they're not paying me to do it. But I was listening to an autobiography of quite a famous British stand-up, and I was walking along, and I was lost in the moment. I mean, look, I knew my way. I wasn't a threat to people on the traffic, on the pavement. You know, social distancing, stopping for pavements, etc. But I found myself really enjoying it and actually laughing as I went along, and I realised what a great walk this was. I've walked this way to the shops many a time, and sometimes it's quite boring, you know, the same old view, the same old houses, cars going by. But this was one of the most pleasurable walks to the shops and back I've ever had. And I realised it just went in no time. And as I came into the door, laughing again at another great line from this autobiography, I thought to myself, oh my God, you've just spent the last 20 minutes walking along quite past people, and you've been laughing for most of the way. They must think you're an idiot. They can't hear it. You're walking along, just with a big grin on your face. People will probably think you need locking up. And it just got me thinking, the perception of people when you're listening to your things. I've become the person that I always mocked in my mind on the train. And you know what? I'm not going to openly mock somebody on a train because some people might not appreciate it and call it bullying. But I've often sat there on a train when I used to commute a lot into town, whether it be Dublin or Birmingham or sometimes London. And I'd watch the activities. I mean, I remember one time going to London on the Marylebone train from Solihull. And it was about 7:30 in the morning. And there was plenty of seats for people to sit away from me. But this lad sat next to me, plugged in his headphones, put on his little notepad and started watching something and was like, I turned over, I went to have a look at what he was watching, and it was the One Show. I mean, I was like, what? There's nothing to laugh at on the One Show, and why would you watch the One Show on the train? It's not that good. You should have if you miss it at 7 o'clock on a Monday night, you miss it. But I'll often like observe people I'm very covert about it, but my brain's not covert. I could be watching somebody on a train, and if they catch eye contact, I'll just go. But really, I've been watching them for half an hour, and I've been swearing at them in my mind. I've called them the C word. I've wished things have happened to them, like they haven't got to get a ticket and they get kicked off. But yeah, I became that person the other day with the podcast, that drivers go past and go, what a wanker. That people on the street go, ooh, get away from him, not just because of COVID-19, but because he's weird. He's walking along laughing at something in his ear that I don't know what it is. He might be laughing at some tragic accident. I wasn't. I was listening to an autobiography that was very funny, but that was an observation from the week as well. I'm not stretching. These are things I wanted to talk about, and I did want to talk about lockdown as well. What has lockdown done to us, and what is lockdown going to do to us? And I do think that I don't think we can go back to lockdown in the way that it was before, where you're fighting over toilet roll. You're scared to go for a poo because you just don't know whether the toilet roll's going to last, so you hold it in to be more economical. And no pubs open, no sport on the TV, can't see your family, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I just don't think we can go back to that. And on a serious note, I said this yesterday, on a very, very serious point here. I said we can't go back to that because at the end of the day, there are people out there who are dying of cancer through lack of screening. And you know what? There was about 5 or 6 people on Twitter who said, look at this idiot. He's comparing COVID-19 to cancer. Cancer's not contagious. And I was like, I don't really want to get into this, but you're the idiot. You're not listening. You're not reading, actually. You don't need to listen on Twitter. You're not reading, because cancer is actually going to cause way more deaths than COVID, because it always will do. But it's going to cause way more preventable deaths, because there are massive waiting lists now for urgent cancer screening. People are not getting operations. People are not going to the doctor because they don't want the hassle. There is a massive backlog caused by this lockdown, and mental health will be the same. Domestic abusers, not abusers, they'll be fine. I mean, people are victims of it who are, maybe don't want to report it because they're actually in the house all the time with the abuser. Child abuse, loads of things are being prevented. There's a silent killer here because it's not statistical. We can't all go round and do a cancer test. Oh, you've got symptoms that you would have got checked out 6 months ago if it wasn't for COVID. So on a very serious note, I don't think COVID... It's harsh. I could get it. You might be watching this back in the future and going, he should have been a bit more careful. I could get COVID. I could be one of those people who die. But I'll tell you what, and I'll say this now, we can't go back to this anymore because too many people are going to die of other things. And, you know, it's not worth locking everything down for this anymore. We've got to learn to live with it. And I personally, when I'm out and about, I think the vast majority are doing a good job. Social distancing in pubs, social distancing on public transport, social distancing. People are very, very clever. It's the thick few that are knocking us back into these concerns. And to be honest with you, I can't be asked to go back into a rigid lockdown because society's too thick to do it like we have been for the last few weeks. I've not been on a bloody plane on holiday. I thought it was a stupid idea. Loads of people, I've seen, Facebook's full of it. Oh, look at me on holiday in Greece, just kicking back with my cocktail. I think, take the tail away, more like a cock, because you're selfish. You've been on a bloody plane. You've been abroad. In fact, you've been on 2 flights. I wish you'd been on 1 and stayed there, actually. But you've been on 2 flights with loads of people in a different country, coming back in. And it's these sort of selfish idiots, I would say, who, you know, people say, oh, you know, at college we can't social distance. You can. The problem is you're all congregating on your way to college. I've seen you all outside the school gates when I'm dropping my daughter off. People are stood there. How are you doing? Are you all right? That's not social distancing. It's not social distancing. People need to social distance, and then we won't need to go into a full-scale lockdown. You walk into a pub, somebody stands away from you, you give your details, they put you to the table, they bring you your food. If you get it, you're very unlucky. But if you congregate together, you're gonna spread it. And that's what's happening at the moment. People need to just appreciate this freedom that we have, because this freedom we have at the moment is very different to the one we had 3 months ago. Do you want to go back to that? Of course, we all want to be there with our friends and families. We all want to be at rock concerts listening to Bon Jovi or somebody else. And we all want to be watching football in the ground. Of course we do. But to get there, we're probably not going to get there till we've got a vaccine. So do you want to be where we are now, or do you want to be where we were 3 months ago? And I don't want to go back to that. I really don't. So I think there needs to be... People need to take on their own responsibility. And I don't see why I and many other people who have been responsible over the last 6 months need to go back into a full-scale lockdown because selfish people can't be arsed to social distance properly and avoid, you know, getting themselves into situations where you're going to give yourself a high chance of catching it if you're in the vicinity of somebody who's got it. My chances of getting it are quite limited because I don't go near people. You know, it's a family member I haven't seen for a while and they come running towards me. I say, get away, 2 meters, 2 meters. You can see me from there. Take a picture if you want. But in seriousness, no, I don't want to go back into full-blown lockdown. I felt it worked at the time, but we can manage this, and I think we need to manage it, and it needs to be togetherness. We need that back. What's 2020 going to be about? We were clapping outside every Thursday for the nurses. Woo, we're all in it together. Are we going to go back to not being like that? Let's end 2020 in a positive way if we can do. Anything else I wanted to... Well, I just wanted to say about that as well. It's a weird... I think where people are struggling for it is that, you know, like in pubs now, you almost have to book a spot in a pub. The old, oh, you know, I'm going to go and drown my sorrows down the pub. You know, imagine you've had a bad day at work, or you've had an argument with somebody at home, or I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this. The one show's shit. I'm off down the pub. Those things that people used to do, you can't do anymore because, you know, you go down to the pub, you go, no, you've not booked, have you? And you can't just sit on the end of the table on the end of the bar, nursing a pint. No. So the world has changed in that way, hasn't it? But look, this was a filler. I stand by the content. I think the content's fantastic, but it was always a filler because we should have been cooking something that we'll be doing next week now. But thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new. Lots of people are enjoying this. I think a lot of people didn't know it existed. There's if you didn't know it existed, there's lots more like this all over this channel. I don't know how many of these I've done, but they're all a good old romp. Thanks everyone for watching. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe if you're new.